Today on Game Talk Live, we're discussing the recent closure of Cliff Bleszinski's game studio, Boss Key Productions, and all the mishaps that led to its fate. Let's dig in. I'm Andy Roman, and welcome to Game Talk Live, where we discuss the biggest video game news of the day, live with help from our chat audience. Joining me now are three expert guests to discuss these gaming topics and more. First up is Tal. Tal Blevins has spent his time in the industry covering video game news. He helped launch GameSpot back in the mid-90s and is a co-founder of IGN.com. Hi, Tal.
Howdy.
Also joining us today is Dave Oshry, the CEO of indie game outfit New Blood Interactive, the studio behind games such as Dusk and Amid Evil. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Good to be here.
And also joining us today is Dan Hammill. He's been a content creator for 10 years and is now a gaming consultant. He gained a substantial following from his Halo-focused YouTube channel, Ready Up Live. Welcome back to the show, Dan.
Thanks for having me.
All right, guys, let's hop into today's first topic. Industry luminary Cliff Bleszinski announced through a tweet on Monday that he would be closing down his studio, Boss Key Productions. CliffyB admitted that the failure of Lawbreakers took a toll on the studio, followed by, quote, a last-ditch attempt as they tried to enter the battle royale genre. So, what happened with Lawbreakers? What were the ultimate factors that you believe led to its lack of success? Dan, let's start with you.
It's really hard to pinpoint because the game industry is a fickle, interesting thing, and that something that may have been a blockbuster at one time, mere months later, could just become not a blockbuster. Could lead to the closure of a company. And so I think honestly, there's a lot of relatively easy answers. Those being just wrong place, wrong time. I don't think it necessarily speaks on the game because I actually think it was an incredible game, and those who had the chance to play it when it was populated with servers or in the beta or whatever, it's just very fun. I had an absolute blast with it, and I wanted it to succeed because it scratched this itch that Overwatch didn't for me. That Overwatch was almost a more simplified Lawbreakers, or Lawbreakers was a more complex Overwatch. But they had to compete with Overwatch, and they had to compete with all these hero shooters. And right now is not the age of hero shooters. Right now is the age of battle royale.
Gotcha. Tal, do you have anything you'd like to contribute on why you think maybe Lawbreakers didn't take off?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing was, like Dan said, the game's mechanics were there. It was a really good game. It's just the genre maybe is not as big as it used to be back in the day. I was a huge Unreal Tournament player back in the day, and I love arena shooters, right? It's just hard to find when you're making a game and investing tens of millions of dollars into a game, you have to attract, a lot of players. And while, it did attract some, it just didn't really have, A, the player base that it needed, and B, I didn't actually really see a big marketing budget for this game either. So really getting, the name out there, that I think a lot of what Nexon was doing was writing off of what Cliff had done in the past. And, it's hard work developing a game, right? You've got to get the marketing budget out there. You got to let people know about it so it can actually do well in the market as well.
Yeah. Dave, was there anything you noticed about Lawbreakers that you're like, you can pinpoint and be like, this is why it didn't succeed?
Well, we know what Nexon said, right? Nexon blamed PUBG. And it wasn't just PUBG. It wasn't just Overwatch. There was so many. We have what I like to call an embarrassment of riches of multiplayer shooters right now. There are so many games for people to play. Destiny 2 came out at the same time, on consoles. And the thing is, even if Lawbreakers is as good as it was, and Lawbreakers is a very good game, the barrier of entry also, it was a $30 game. Fortnite was coming up free to play. Nobody mentioned Paladins, the literal free to play Overwatch clone from Hi-Rez, which has, I think, 17 million players. There's just so many games for people to play that aren't Lawbreakers. So even if Lawbreakers is really, really good, which it was, if you're the one guy going, hey guys, come play Lawbreakers with me, and they're like, well, I've already invested my time and my money in all these games, it's hard to break that barrier of entry. It's hard to suddenly get you and all your friends playing a game that costs $30 and is new and has hard onboarding when there's all these other games to play. It was just, too little, too late, wrong place, wrong time. But the game itself, nobody's denying it was great. It's just, there was just so much else going on.
Right. So you speak to the barrier of entry of $30. Initially, the game was supposed to be free to play, and then they later decided we're going to charge $30 for it. Additionally, Cliffy also said it was the Dark Souls of arena shooters, which I think is kind of an interesting concept. So, Dan, do you think maybe the game was too hard in a sense? Like, I say that in quotes because
absolutely. I actually do believe that. Having played pretty much some of the most high-level lawbreakers you could play. I definitely got up there at a point. I won't say I was anywhere near the top, but I played with those guys. And certainly, I will honestly say, in my gaming career, it was some of the most hardcore shooting action I've ever played, and that's just I'm not blowing smoke up you here. Like, I actually was. It was crazy how fast paced it was, and it was really just getting all these mechanics down, taking what you know of. Just, you have to really pinpoint your aim. There's no auto aim there. It was so laser focused, and it really brought back these feelings of, say, old school Quake games or Unreal Tournament games, but add all this flying around and managing areas that were low gravity and not low gravity, and just really, or the characters who could throw leeches and such, right? And you're just really doing so many things at once and working with your team that it was insane. And so you had all these people that were certainly, you would jump into a game and you would just get so absolutely pummeled that it was just like, I don't even stand a chance here. I can't just press Q to win, because even the Q abilities were very much like, oh, you go a little faster, right? Which I actually like. It's not just like press Q and wipe out half the map. It was press Q and I have a little shield, right? So you really stayed, it was all skill. It was all aim.
Yep. So we talked a little bit about there was a lot happening in the market at the time when Lawbreakers was announced. I mean, Dave, as someone that works in game development, is getting to the market first integral, because we saw similarly with Battleborn that just totally got overshadowed by Overwatch that came out just a few weeks later. I mean, but technically they were first to market. So, I mean, talk a little bit about timing maybe on releases.
I mean, timing's important. The problem is when you're in that deep and dev cycles are that long. So we make indie games, right? So we're putting out games within 2 years. We're not 2 years of development and then another year, of polish and then release. But with games like that, once you're in that deep, you got to just come out when you're ready. And in that time, you can't plan around what else is going to happen. Not everybody knows what everybody else is making. So like when Gearbox started on Battleborn, if Battleborn would have come out like a year before it did, it probably would have been a big hit. But it landed literally right at the same time, I think, as the Overwatch beta, and there was no hope. And then, Lawbreakers, same thing. If it would have come out, a little bit earlier, instead it landed right, I think, when they were doing a giant Overwatch update, when PUBG was just taking off Fortnite, a game that Cliff actually revealed back in 2011 when he was at Epic, had started to take off and become the new big battle royale game. There was a ton of huge games dropping that summer. Being at the right place at the right time, you can't always plan for that. And that's, I think, one of the big problems when you get to these giant studios with these giant budgets. Once you're in too deep, you kind of just got to land where you land and hope nobody else is going to take your thunder when you do. Sure.
All right, so moving away from Lawbreakers, let's talk about the closure of Boss Key. Obviously, the lack of success of Lawbreakers led to this closure. But Tal, I'd love to hear from you. What do you think should be the social media kind of protocol from a CEO or founder when a studio closes its doors?
I think Cliff did a good job. I mean, getting that message out there and actually making a personal announcement instead of it just coming out over the wire or somebody else picking it up. I think that was a good step. Now, I'm not sure exactly what was said internally. Obviously, there were probably some conversations internally, and the team knew before Cliff put that message out. But, I mean, I think it was handled really well. I do think, it's something that we see all too often with game studios closing. Like I said, making a game is tough, and it can cost a lot of money. And if you take a lot of risk and you just don't find the audience that you needed, you're not going to do, you're going to fail. You're not going to be able to succeed. We're basically paying $60. Well, between, like Dave was saying, between $30 and $60 for a new game now, which is really not any more than we were paying 30, 40 years ago for video games, and they cost so much more to make now. To really come out and you have to attract multiple times the audience than you ever did before, and your margins are so low. And if you're not capturing a massive amount of people immediately, you have a big chance of failure going on there.
There's been no inflation somehow.
There's been no what?
There's been no inflation somehow. Super Nintendo games cost the same as games cost now. How does that work?
Right.
It's a great question.
That would be wonderful, right?
Yeah, so, I mean, there's been no really official press release, and there's also been no word from any of the official Twitter accounts of the actual games that they create. I mean, does that strike you as odd, Tal?
You know what? If the game didn't get, it is a little weird. I do agree with that. I think more people follow Cliff, and I think that word got around from just the mouth of Cliff instead of the official game accounts. But yeah, I agree. Actually, you should do an overall message, and you absolutely should. The people who are still supporting or following your social media feeds. I think that's super important that you need to reach out to those official feeds and let those feeds also send out the message. That said, press release, I don't know. Press releases don't mean that much anymore. We're in the age of social media, so I do think getting that word out.
Breaking up a little bit there, Tal. Okay, so I think he's coming back. Okay, there we go. Okay, so it seems super risky to go straight out of the gate with a huge AAA style title as a company's kind of first game, speaking to Boss Key Productions and Lawbreakers. Dan, do you think Lawbreakers was too ambitious of a title for a brand new studio, or do you think because Cliffy was backing it that it was fine?
Yeah, not necessarily. I think it's kind of hard to answer. That's one of those things that it's just, if we were sitting here discussing how successful Lawbreakers was, this conversation would just be going the other way, right? Right. So I don't think there's any inherent bad idea there. Like, I don't think you're inherently going to have a bad time, to fail if you're throwing a lot of money and really working on an amazing title. I think there's certainly a fair amount of ambition there, but I've also seen some really, really, really ambitious small indie games, right? And so I don't think that is inherently a problem.
Yeah. Dave, what are your thoughts from an indie developer standpoint? I mean, do you think it was super risky to go out the gate trying to, what in essence feels like a recreation of trying to get Gears of War success again?
Back then, I think that's all, Cliff knows. He always had, huge backing. And then when he was, at Epic, huge backing from Microsoft, tens of millions of dollars just in the marketing budget alone. And to start at that high of a level, I think if Cliff would have started small, because I know Cliff, but, he wants to go big. I think if he would have started small and worked his way up, probably would have been successful. The problem is, he had the power and the money to attract not only, a big budget to make this game, but some of the best devs in the world. I mean, he assembled like the A-team to start Boss Key. These were all industry veterans, and they wanted to go out there and he wanted to make another big, badass multiplayer shooter. This is what he's known for. I mean, look at Cliff's resume. It's, nobody's got one like it in terms of Western game devs. We're talking about Unreal, Gears of War. He was an integral part of Fortnite when it was still there. Even stuff like Bulletstorm when he was on his way out. I mean, these were huge franchises that paved the way in the genres that they they were a part of. So I mean, if anybody was going to do it, it had to be Cliff, right? We can, hindsight's 2020. We can go back and say, oh, we should have started small. Oh, we should have done this. Oh, we should have done that. But at the time, it was, he was able to, get a big budget, start a new studio in his hometown. Like, I've been there. The place was super cool, and everybody was super jazzed to work there. Like, I would have been too. Like, I get to work for Cliff. A lot of these dudes coming out of college or other studios, I get to go work with CliffyB on a, on a big multiplayer shooter. This is awesome. Like, I would have thought it was awesome too. So at the time, sure, it's hard to say that I wouldn't have done it if I were him, because he had the power, but now hindsight's 2020, right?
Yeah. So it's coming into this kind of money and success by someone like CliffyB. Do you think it's kind of skewing his expectations of future titles or entire studios, that it will immediately be successful? Tal, what do you think?
I don't think so. I don't know if you saw what Cliff posted up about his other idea that they were pitching for a while. I think it was called Dragonflies, which was you would find dragon eggs, you would hatch these dragon eggs, you would have dragon battles, you would have these airships that were like your aircraft carriers for dragons. So it's I think you can bring in some new ideas into it. I don't think you necessarily have to think small. I think you need to think big. It's just that no publishers were willing to fund a new project, right? It's the risk that's involved with a project like that, and they want to go for what they think is going to be a sure thing, where, a lot of times you can have a huge, big breakout hit that's a brand new idea instead of just going for what's worked in the past.
Right. Yeah, one of those other titles that he promoted, I think it was called Donuts or something. It was like really adorable concept art with some cute critters. I think it looked really promising, and I'm sad we'll probably never see it come to fruition. So, Dan, do you think shuttering the studio was selfish on Cliffy's part? I mean, he hired all these talented people, like we said, some of probably the greatest game devs, and he couldn't have appointed maybe someone else to lead the studio?
I think it's a side effect that was almost inevitable there. I mean, I can't even imagine what the morale was like there. I can't imagine how much money had been sunk there, right? And I think just being like, look, like, things didn't work out here. We tried twice. Maybe we should kind of move on to something else, right? Like, it's how many times should you try at something before, and morale's only going to get lower and lower, right? And at some point it's just going to break. And so between also having a lot of people just leaving or getting sniped by, I mean, he had a tweet that went pretty viral not too long ago where Epic was actually pulling people off his team and stuff, and he was definitely salty about that. And so, those kind of things would just keep happening, and I don't think, I think this is kind of a preemptive strike before things got worse.
Yeah, Epic's, I believe, just 10 minutes from Boss Key's studio,
yeah,
right? It's real close, right, Dave?
I've been to both. They're literally, very short Uber ride away from each other.
Yeah. So clearly, Radical Heights was a desperate attempt to keep Boss Key afloat, was rapidly launching a new title, even if just in early access, the best course of action. Dave, what do you think?
Well, I think, when they announced it, it seemed like it was something that they had been working on, they were doing for fun, but we all kind of had the idea was that they needed to get something out to get some revenue going. You could tell Nexon had pulled the plug completely on Lawbreakers. They weren't going to double down on it. But, everyone I know who played Radical Heights thought it showed a ton of potential, right? It was just really, really early. So I think if they had some more time, had some more money, it could have found, a lot of people were saying it found a nice, pretty decent foothold between, PUBG and Fortnite. And everyone I know who plays it, it says, Radical Heights is, pretty good, has a lot of potential. I think, over time, it could really turn into like a really fun, battle royale alternative, because it did some things that the other games aren't doing. But like I think Cliff ended up saying, it was too little too late. It didn't have a huge player base. It wasn't, it was bringing in, I'm sure it's bringing in some revenue, but not enough to keep a company like that going. They have a lot of overhead, a lot of employees. And it's tough out there. I think, it's just like he said, too little too late.
Yep. Tal, what do you think? Do you think launching a new title in kind of a desperate attempt was the right thing, or should they maybe just close down sooner rather than later?
I think it was one of the only things they could do. Like Dave said, too little, too late. It's unfortunate. I do think they were doing some pretty interesting things, but I think they were backed into a corner and they wanted to see if they could actually get something rolling again. Kind of reminds me of the final days of THQ and how they had one of the best lineups that I had seen from them in years. Right, and then they had to shut because it was just too little, too late at that point.
Yep. So last week, Twitch hosted a Radical Heights Twitch Rivals competition where 12 streamers competed for $120,000. At the time of this competition, only 300 concurrent players were live on Steam playing Radical Heights. Is this indicative of a lack of communication between Boss Key marketing team and the studio heads? Because it seems like really bad timing between when the competition happened and when the layoffs happened. Dan, what do you got?
Yeah, it's kind of funny seeing that. I was like, oh, and I actually watched a bit of it. It was quite entertaining. I was like, yeah, it really showed promise and really made Radical Heights seem like a cool thing to check out. But it was pretty interesting seeing that and thinking, oh yeah, this is it's going to pick up again. They're going to be throwing some more money at this, or they're going to be developing this more. They'll release some cool updates and stuff. And then it felt like, oh, it was what, a mere days later or whatever. That suddenly, oh, we're closing down, right? Like, why did this even happen so late? It was interesting. I don't know why that didn't happen, at earlier to the launch of Radical Heights. Or it's just a really weird promo.
Yeah. All right, guys, it's time to take a quick break. But before we do, I want to ask our viewers to leave a comment or send us a tweet at Game Talk Live, letting us know what topics you'd like to see us discuss on the show. We'll be right back.
We have 75 players in cheers right now. Let me hear you make some noise.
Hi, my name's Todd. We're going to be playing some H1Z1, and a lot of you out there are going to be able to win some prizes by guessing when our guests die. Sasha, are you ready to go play some H1Z1?
Let's do this.
I think we've seen this story before.
We got a lot of guests tonight from all over the world. They're competing for a trophy, our Champion of the Night prize. Which one of you is going to be the best player tonight?
Anybody that comes in my way is done.
Get a helmet, get a backpack, get a rifle.
Kill everyone.
Kill that person.
Engage.
Kill.
I give the people what they want to see.
Oh my God! Oh wow, he took a big hit. He got it, guys!
Can you throw me in like the Norwegian server or like someplace where they're just not gonna find me?
No.
Did I die first?
No one's died that early in the game ever.
Boss Key Productions is just one of many studios that has suddenly shut down within the past year. Following in the footsteps of beloved developers such as Visceral Games, Bleszinski and his employees are experiencing the harsh reality of working in the gaming industry. So why do we hear so often about game studios closing? What is it about game development that has such high turnover? Dave, I'd love to start with you.
Oh, man.
I know it's a rough question, so...
Well, first of all, we've got no unions. So let's just throw that one out there. You know, there's no job security. This is a gig economy. Everyone's just going from place to place, studio to studio, trying to get that secure AAA job with, health benefits and puppy daycare. But it's hard out there. I mean, you're either, being a scrappy indie like we are, trying to, have a breakout hit so, you can do something besides run your game studio out of your apartment, or, getting a AAA job. Everywhere in the middle is a mess, and it's because there's no organization. And there's so much talent out there, and it's not organized, and there's just so much turnover, especially with the way games are made these days, and especially when you have games that fall short. I mean, we're not just talking about, because Boss Key was a small, medium-sized studio. There's these giant studios that have games that fall short, and then they have to lay off tons of staff, and then those people, I mean, hashtag game jobs, people are always going from studio to studio, packing up and moving across the country, and we've got to do something about it, but it's so rough out there because games don't meet expectations and because budgets are so inflated that the first people to go is the talent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Tal, you've been in the industry a long time reporting on it. What's been your experience? Why do you think that we see so many studios shuttering so frequently?
Well, look, it really is a game now where you have the big AAAs and then you have the small indies, and there is no middle anymore, right? It's a very sparse middle. It used to be a really, like we were talking about THQ just a little bit a while ago, right? Publishers like THQ could fit that middle ground, and we used to have places like Looking Glass Studios, who did some amazing titles, but were still relatively small. Over the past 10 or 15 years, you really saw as the cost of games, and it takes more people to make these big AAA experiences, rose, that it was really hard for that middle ground to really compete in the same space. Because, like Dave said, as an indie, you have to be scrappy and you have a very small team. But you think about costs and running, out of your apartment or running out of a small office, as opposed to being like in the mid tier where, man, every single month it gets harder and harder to make that rent, and it gets harder and harder to make that payroll when you have a team of 30, 40, 50, 60 people. And it's also hard to get publishers to really back projects like that, because they're scared they're not going to make their 2, 3, 4, 5 million in sales, reaching an audience like that. It's really hard for that middle ground right now. So I'm not sure how we fix that. It has really changed a lot in the past decade, though, in the games industry.
Yeah, Dave, did you want to add something else?
I mean, it's, in the past few years, for a while, crowdfunding was saving the middle ground, right? It was saving all these small studios and stuff, the Obsidians and the Double Fines of the world. And now even that has gotten so hard. Kickstarter for games was the next big thing. All, the Tim Schafers and the Brian Fargos of the world were going to be able to fund all their games for $1 to $2 million and, sell a few million copies, and everything was going to be right with the world. And then Kickstarter for games imploded. That bubble burst. And Fargo's gone and done his own thing with Fig, and they've done okay, with the In Exile and the Obsidian type games of the world. But now even crowdfunding is not a thing anymore for games. It doesn't matter, you can have the coolest pitch and some famous devs in your Kickstarter, and you won't even get 50% anymore. That's dead. So now we're back to square zero of, people trying to pitch games to, mid-tier and big publishers, but not only is the money not there, but nobody wants to take the risk.
So why do you think that? Oh, go ahead, Tal.
No, I was going to say it's so funny, too, now, because we have the largest number of gamers that we've ever had, and the average age of the gamer is rising, and yet we're seeing fewer new ideas, at least coming out of big studios, because, again, like Dave said, everybody's afraid to take that risk, right? It costs so much to create a big AAA experience, and everybody expects the best graphics and, the best story and the longest experience that they can get, and just, great mechanics. Like, everything has to come together, and it has to be a 20, 30, 40-hour experience. And that costs a lot of money.
Yeah, people want God of War and they want it for $20.
Or they want it for free. They want it for no bucks. They,
Yeah.
They want to just be able to download it.
Free of war, microtransactions to use your axe.
Oh, God. So, Dan, what do you think this does for morale? I mean, do you think instances like this make developers hesitant to continue a career or even start a career in gaming?
Well, I think it's certainly opening it up the conversation of the people behind games. I saw that a lot with even just Boss Key closing. A lot of Twitter discussions coming out and people, giving their support to Cliff and giving support to Boss Key and saying, look, offering jobs at their companies. I saw people like 343 off saying that their doors are open to people. And I think it's, to the average internet Twitter user, it's very easy to forget who's behind the games and how many personalities, how many great talent are there. And these instances, one of the weird bright side of all of this is really having that come out again and come to the surface and saying, look, like there's these people that, we're having this discussion right now, right? Mm-hmm. There are a lot of amazing people behind these games that need to be fed, need to feed their families, and the jobs are hard. It's this whole discussion here, right? Like it really opens up the doors to keep talking about this. It sucks, and it's an inevitable stepping stone, I think. But I feel like in the next few years, we're hopefully going to see some measures taken.
And hopefully we don't just, I was just going to say, hopefully we don't just talk about it when a studio closes. Yeah. Because, that's what we're talking about is the only time we're having this conversation is if a studio shutters its doors. Tal, what were you going to add?
I just wanted to, build on what Dan and Dave were saying. Like, making games really is kind of a gypsy economy, right? People go from project to project. And this is something that's been happening in Hollywood for decades and decades. And, to Dave's point, the unions are really what keeps people with a safety net there, right? Where they have health care and they have the ability to negotiate their contracts a little bit more. And they feel like, just because a project ends, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to be in limbo. And I agree with Dave. I think there needs to be a system like that within the video game industry. Because it's a tough industry to get into if you know anything about the industry, because it's just not very stable, right? And then if you want to have a family and you want to live like a normal human being and have a good life-work balance, it's just really tough to do.
Yeah. So Cliffy will likely be fine. He's rolling in money. But what about all the employees that were laid off? Boss Key was based in, or is based in North Carolina, but outside of Epic, there aren't a whole lot of other studios in the area. Dave, I imagine a lot of people probably relocated to work for Boss Key, but now what? Mm-hmm.
There's a ton of people hiring, and I know a lot of people who are at Boss Key and have already, gotten jobs everywhere. Epic's obviously hiring like crazy, but so is Blizzard. Blizzard is on a crazy hiring spree, talking about Overwatch, Bethesda, a ton of people, studios in Austin, up in Seattle. People are hiring. That's the crazy thing about games is there's tons of talent, there's tons of people out of work, but there is always jobs to be had. It's not about finding work so much as it is finding stable work and not having to move every few years. And like Tal was saying, if you have, it's easy if you're just out of college or something and you're looking for your first job, but if you've been in the industry for 10 years and you keep, getting let go from studios after big projects, that's a problem. People need stability in their lives. They deserve stability in their lives.
Mm-hmm. Well, and if you've shipped a AAA project, that's usually quite helpful in getting a new gig. At least if Lawbreakers might have not been successful, but at least they shipped a title, so that says something.
Yeah, that's the hardest part of making games is just
getting it out the door. So Dave, from an indie perspective, do you feel like you have a little bit more job security because you don't have a publisher above your head in a way?
Yeah, but for me, it's just, it's keeping myself and my guys afloat, right? And we have job security because we don't make enough money to have an office, or but I can't give my guys health care. I can't give them daycare. They can't relocate for me yet. That's the dream, or is it? People are like, Dave, what's the next step for you in New Blood? I'm like, I don't know. Maybe get an office. Maybe give my guys full salaries. Right now I can't do that. I could go and find publisher money or take on outside investment, but then all of a sudden there's all that risk, right? Right now there's no risk because we're doing it all ourselves. We're bootstrapped. We're keeping the company afloat based on revenue from the games we're putting out. And it's scary to think of doing it any other way, of even going out and taking someone else's money. There's no free money. You know, I go out and get an investment of a few $1,000,000. I have to suddenly make games and pay all that back before I can even start paying my guys, before I can put, you know, a roof over our heads for a studio, that kind of overhead. And the cost of living is, you know, if you want to be in a part of the country or a part of the world where there's a ton of developers, you know, like in the Bay Area or, you know, the Pacific Northwest, it's astronomical. You know, people can't even afford to live in San Francisco. They live in Oakland and they fly to San Francisco to go work at game studios. So it's wild. So which is why we're not doing it. You're either scrappy or you've got a job. And like we've been saying, there is no middle. There is no middle class in games anymore. And it's a scary thought.
Mm-hmm. All right, guys, this has been an enlightening discussion. I'd love to thank all of our viewers and our guests for being here. Tell us what you're currently working on and where people can find you on social media. And we'll start with Tal.
Hey, people can find me at Talign, that's Talign, Talign, just like a line, but with a T in front of it. I am looking forward to E3, and I'm hoping that every developer there sells billions of copies of their games so we don't have to have this problem anymore.
Wonderful. All right, Dave, where can people find you online, and what are you currently working on?
People can find me at Dave Oshry on Twitter and everywhere else. You can find the New Blood community at discord.gg/newblood. We're putting out updates for Dusk and a Medieval in the coming weeks, not to mention Unfortunate Spacemen. And we should have a couple of cool announcements around E3 too. So I'll see you guys at E3.
Great. Thanks, Dave. All right, Dan, what do you currently got going on, and where can people find you online?
I say find me at Twitter, just Greenskull on Twitter, Greenskull pretty much everywhere. And working on a billion things right now, but most recently I'm going to start streaming on Facebook. So I'll be among good company.
Welcome to the club. All right. Yeah. Thanks to everyone who watched, commented, and shared the show. I'm Andy Roman. Don't forget to like our Facebook page and watch Game Talk live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 2 p.m. Pacific. See you next time.